Hello and welcome back, composers and arrangers. Today we're talking about the trumpet. We've already had some experience with the horn and the brass in general. Now we're getting into the weeds a little bit about the details of sound production, what's possible on the horn, what's the overall dynamic contour. That's what you should walk away from this video with. Okay, properties of the trumpet. Of course, trumpet, not to be confused with the trombone. If the horn is, let's say, the alto tenor range of the brass choir, then the trumpet, of course, is the soprano member. That's right, Renee Fleming. I didn't know she played trumpet, but apparently she does in this alternate reality. The written range, this is important to mark down. I would write it down, make sure it's burned in your memory and that you can access it when you need to. Below the staff to above the staff is an F sharp written to a high C. Now this is slightly debatable because there are some what they call screamers, trumpet players who can play higher than that high C, but think of this essentially just much like the soprano, that this is a general good place to stop. All right. So this, if this were trumpet in C, it'd be this F sharp to the high C sharp, C natural. And of course, if it were trumpet in B flat, that would be sounding down a major second. So the lowest note would be that low sounding E and the highest B flat. Okay, the dynamic curve, what do you think? You're probably thinking similarly to a soprano, right? The lower notes for a soprano vocalist tend to be softer. Higher notes tend to be louder. Same is true for the trumpet and the brass in general. Now, does that mean that you absolutely cannot have a piano marking for a note that's in the high range? Well, of course there are exceptions. It's just that you're working against the natural tendency of the instrument. So you should think of the extreme high, that last, let's say, F to C, as being slightly louder in general, harder to control. A large, noble sound, this is a good description, tends to dominate and overshadow other members of the orchestra. I often wonder what comes first, the personality. Does the personality seek out the instrument, or does the instrument make the personality? Well, it's true. Many trumpet players tend to be very confident and full of energy, and sometimes they are the troublemakers in the room. When you're teaching a class of brass players, often the trumpet players who might be causing some trouble, or the trombone players too. It's just true. It's a louder instrument, tends to cut through. For that reason, you need to be careful how you're balancing. So let's say you have a forte dynamic and you're bringing in the brass. Well, just as we've already seen with the horns, we need to compensate with more sound from the horns if you want an equal sound against a trumpet. Okay, in a more reasonable register at a softer dynamic, of course, we can get away with a 1-to-1 ratio. The modern trumpet has a brilliant tone, greater agility than the valveless trumpet. As you can imagine, the valveless trumpet is simply based off the fundamental of the instrument, as we were saying in our exploration of brass in general. That's such a powerful beginning from Richard Strauss, also Sprach Zarathustra, which is based on the natural overtone series. Of course, the modern trumpet has the valve, so we can access all the chromatic notes in between. Okay, the trumpet in C, you should know, is associated with the orchestra, or associated with the orchestral musicians. I should finish that sentence. It's not to say that you cannot have B-flat instruments. It just tends to be that in an orchestra that you will have access to C instruments. Beginning players will tend to start with the B-flat instrument. Sounds down a major second. It's richer. Has a fine low register, and yes, it is associated with jazz or a concert band. So you should expect, if you're teaching younger players, you will be starting with a B flat instrument. Trumpet in D and trumpet in E flat, less common, and they're used for the range. As you can imagine, they are sounding higher. So if you wrote C major for trumpet in D, of course, it would come out a step higher. For E flat, it would come out a minor third higher. So you can imagine this would be very useful if you had a piece, let's say in G flat major. You really had to have this key. You cannot have it be F major or G major. Well, you could consider using the trumpet in E flat. This would potentially help you. That would be in E flat major, be sounding up a minor third. Okay, so that would be much easier to read in terms of agility. It also gives you a bit more of the high range. If that's our highest note, high C for trumpet in C, well, of course, this would extend the range, that high E flat. So that could be very useful if you want a very powerful sound. Okay, and piccolo trumpet sounds up a minor seventh or a perfect octave from the trumpet in B flat. That's probably an easier way to think of it as relating to the B flat instrument. Right now, I can tell you're all thinking of Penny Lane, and that's exactly, you wouldn't be wrong at all. That is the piccolo trumpet right at the beginning of Penny Lane. So you can all press play on your favorite Beatles tune after this. In terms of articulation and tonguing, it is the fastest speaking member of the brass choir. Compare this with the French horn. The French horn tends to be rounder, has a slightly slower attack. It has more tubing to get through the instrument to your ears. The bell is also faced the other direction. With the trumpet, the bell is faced directly at the audience, or at least in their direction. Okay, it tends to be a little bit more crisp. Slurred notes are played in one breath. Separate notes are tongued. Single, double, and triple tongue is possible. Ta 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 ta, for example, or ta 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 ta, or ta 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 ta. All right. So much like the flute that we've already studied, all of these tonguings are possible. Single, ta 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 ta, double, ta 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 ta, and triple, ta 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 ta. Okay, you can all practice that at home. If you can perform it, then they can perform it. Muted trumpet. It's good to have the basics. There are many, many mutes, and I would encourage you to spend time with a trumpet player if you want more in detail. But the basics you should know how to mark it on the page. You can simply say it in English with mute. You can say muted, consordino, or consord for short. Okay. To remove it, you just simply say remove mute or open senza sordino, senza sword, without mute. Okay, look at all those. I shouldn't say typical, because not every trumpet player will have that many mutes, but wow, I would not be surprised if I showed up at a friend's house, a trumpet player, and they showed me all of their mutes. I wouldn't be that surprised, because they do have so many to choose from. And depending on the piece, you might be asked to use this or that kind of mute. It's good to have an arsenal to choose from. The basics, you have the straight mute, the Harmon mute. Notice this is stem in. If you want more of the Miles Davis sound, you say stem out. This is the bucket mute and cup mute, which looks a lot like the straight mute, but of course has a different sound. And you can also play into the hat or into the stand. Okay, so I would refer to the website I've given you at the beginning of our class, where you can hear a variety of muted trumpets and the various effects. Okay, some special effects you should take note of. Trills are mostly valved, so you won't be playing with embouchure alone, but they would be played valved. For this reason, you need to avoid the lowest register. Sorry, this is down here. Right, as you can see, try doing this fingering yourself. You have 2, 3 against 1. Very awkward going back and forth. Try to see if you can play with. This would be your index, middle, and ring fingers. That's 1, 2, and 3. See how easy that is to perform. Or all open to all down. 1, so 0, 0, 0 to 1, 2, 3, or 2 to 3. So these are awkward trills that just won't be executed very cleanly. Much like the low range of the bassoon, you have to be wary of it, or the low range of the oboe. Okay, effects that you can use to great chagrin of the people in front of you, but to great effect also. And of course, the resulting sound would be more crisp. I'm sorry, more like a clean swoop up to the top, as opposed to hearing all the individual notes. Okay, this MIDI instrument will only get so close. And then you have what are called falls. Okay, this is a great effect to use at the ends of your phrases, and typically associated with jazz band. Although not necessarily. Here, this could be a great effect for a modern instrument, modern piece of music. Okay. All right, is that getting your gears turning? It's getting you to think about what might be possible for your trumpet composition? I certainly hope so. So the two biggest things I'd like you to be careful of: the range and the overall dynamic contour. Just in case you haven't heard some examples of related instruments, here you have the cornet in B flat, of course, a warmer, that's larger instrument. It's also more conical. Same range, just as much agility. More mellow, cross between a horn and a trumpet. Bass trumpet is actually related more to the trombone. There's some even tuba players who play the bass trumpet. You could think of it as a valved trombone in C. Okay, and the flugelhorn, again, same tuning as B flat, member of the bugle and cornet family, mostly in B flat, very mellow and lush. Okay, so these are good options for you if you want something just darker, or perhaps associated with military. You might go with the cornet. If you want something a little bit very mellow and, let's say, more of the jazz ilk, well, then you might go flugelhorn. But of course, that would depend on who you're writing for and if you know that they have these instruments. Okay, so I think this gives you a good basic foundation for your trumpet melody. So I look forward to hearing those shortly. And once again, take good care of yourself, and I shall see you soon. All right, take care.